So I'm going to do today's reading a little bit different. I'm going to still do the weekly tarot read, so don't worry about that. But I'm going to touch on the collective shadow. So it's going to be a little bit different in this reading. But a lot of people, in looking at this country, and even if you're in other countries, if you happen to see it, definitely we are seeing the collective shadow come to surface. And we're getting some light shined on it right now, with everything coming to surface. And people are kind of feeling it definitely feels a low vibration right now. I think regardless to whatever side or whatever ideas you have, with certain things going on, in the country or world, you can agree that everything is a low vibration. Something like coronavirus obviously is going to put us at a low vibration because we're dealing with something as death. And then we're dealing with systemic racism is going on and people are taking sides on that. People are losing friends. I've talked to a lot of people that have had to say goodbye to certain friends or even family during this time has been, very problematic, because, people are coming out so strongly. But what it is everybody's shadow is coming to the forefront, even the spiritual people, okay? Even people that are, normally light spiritual people, everybody, all of us. There's not one person that is not having their shadow come out. Even me, even certain things, our shadow is coming to the surface and we've really had to examine it. So I've got a layout, and yes, I'm using a shadow deck. I decided to use Deviant Moon for this to kind of discuss some things. Now, it's no surprise the very first card is the High Priestess. I want you to kind of notice something in this image because this is a shadow deck. We know that she deals with the polarity of light and dark, with normally the pillars and so forth. But look at her wings. They're gray. So this is one of the things that the High Priestess does also teach is that light and dark is not such a simple thing. There are shades of gray there. And that's especially what the shadow, when you've got, what you have is you have your ego, and then there is a persona that is projected, like Carl Jung said, but then pushed to the back that nobody wants anyone to see is that person's shadow. And that ego may be completely oblivious to what's really buried there. A lot of people are not aware. And so that's where especially everything with these layers that we've got these gray wings, right? There's gray areas. It can be really hard to determine what exactly is light, dark, or that funny gray area. So the High Priestess, especially, she teaches those secrets. And it comes through intuitively. And this is especially where we have to really listen to the inner voice, not necessarily the shadow side, but we do, of course, we want to be aware of the shadow. That is very important. Now, I want you to kind of note the crossing card is the Four of Swords. Notice it looks like he's meditating or sleeping. So that would be very accurate that is especially when the shadow comes to surface individually, and you could kind of say as a collective shadow, we've all been kind of asleep is one of the things that we want to wake up. Is that the point? One of the things upon awakening is to become aware of our ego as well as our shadow. You can't just become aware of ego. You've got to be aware of the whole process of everything. But especially during dreaming is when you can be aware that certain things will manifest your shadow. The most common is they are normally the same gender. So if you're female, you may come across a female in your dream. And when you see her, you're very repulsed by her. They may chase you, come after you, and you fight them and various things. Certain confrontations like that where you are just repulsed by them, that's your shadow. Now, another thing is also the moon is in a reverse position. So we know the moon for the tarot readers does confuse. And it also with the subconscious, see how they look like puppets on strings, and that's the subconscious forces that control us, especially the shadow self. It controls us more than we want to acknowledge and realize. Now, the two cards to represent the physical are the Queen and the Knight of Pentacles. So these are ourselves with the physical world, but I want you to kind of think on something. We all have our own conservatism. We all have our own morals and values, and we all have an idea of what is right and wrong. We do not all agree on what that is. And that's part of the message of the High Priestess being the first card. This is right. This is wrong. This is my morals. This is my ethics. This is my values. We all formulate them because of our parents and certain things with society or certain things with school, how we were kind of taught and raised. Our religion may have an influence, very strong influence. So we kind of be very practical in the physical what these things are. But still, we got the gray wings, right? We've got those gray wings. So what we may see as right and wrong may be very skewed. And your right or wrong may be very different to another person, especially if it imposes on them in a negative way. I want you to kind of look at this card that I drew in the present position. This is the Three of Swords, and this is especially representing the core wound. Within the shadow, the collective shadow as well, are wounds. And we are especially seeing this. We've been seeing this with the protests and the systemic racism, the deep wounds that people do have, a deep wounding that has gone back for a very long time. But notice the shadow, see the shadow of this image against the wall? That's what we are dealing with, just as I was saying, that this shadow has been surfacing. It isn't just here. Don't think that this is just here. China has concentration camps full of Muslims, and we do have situations that are at the border, but it's also because people are leaving hostile situations. There are people in other countries, obviously in Africa, there's been all kinds of cases of genocide over time, so this is not just isolated to our country. It's just at the forefront right now, and it became a global issue of awareness. But everybody, in some way, shape, or form, capacity, almost, I guess I should say almost, has some kind of issue about people that are in some way different, and then there are people that can judge. But I want you to kind of step back. Like maybe you are one of the people who says Black Lives Matter. Maybe you are embracing that movement. But still, at the same time, when you are upset with someone else, because maybe you are seeing them being racist, either subtly or blatantly, and you are repulsed by that. Okay, that's part of a shadow thing still, though, to be repulsed by something. So one of the things you need to kind of do if you really want to acknowledge your shadow is kind of step back and go, okay, maybe I support this movement, but what about if I look over at this country here? How do I feel about them? How do I feel about them? Where can I check myself that maybe I've got some prejudice or biases or various things within me that maybe I'm supportive here, but I'm not supportive there? That's one of the things as a spiritualist we all want to go ahead and look at is the whole thing. Where am I not seeing that we are one? Where am I not seeing we are all one humanity? We are all one human race. This is what we want to get to. But of course, with these isolated cases, that are coming up, in dramatic, that are popping up, we want to get that awareness and we want to take care of people. So they are, they just have to say, I just want to matter. That's not even a lot to ask, and people are having a hard time with that. It's crazy. But we want to deal with that core wound that is within the shadow. That's what we are especially doing. There is a lot of wounding coming out. There is a lot of pain. And one of the things is when people see another's pain, that feeling, but I didn't do that to you. That's some of the reactions, but I'm not the cause of that. I'm not the reason. People don't want to be made feel guilty, in some way. But that's not what they're trying to do. That's what people need to understand. I just want you aware that this is my wound. This is my pain. I want you to aware and see what's going on. And we need to do that because that's part of acknowledging the collective shadow that is surfacing during this time. People are saying things that normally they would have kept back. That it's not just, slipping to the surface and being projected onto people at this time, but it's really it's to the point they're wearing their shadow. like this. And it's completely to the forefront. And they're doing things they would not normally do. It's because we've lowered the vibration and the shadow has just stormed through the gates. But the reason why, it's not necessarily a bad thing. I know you're going to say, what? It's not necessarily a bad thing, because the more we push it back and we don't acknowledge it, it only grows bigger and bigger. This is why we have such a low vibration right now all over. We pushed it back, we didn't acknowledge it, and all these things were happening that many of us weren't aware of. And now it's all to the forefront. It's all like this. We're all facing that collective shadow. What are we going to do about it? That's the question. We're going to shine light into it. That's what we need to be doing. We need to acknowledge these things, are really there and really what's going on. And that's especially the star is the light at the end of the tunnel. We want to get to the light at the end of the tunnel with this. We've got to shine the light during this time. There's a lot of problems even beyond this. I mean, think about, we have issues all over the world with human trafficking. I want you to think about how dark that is, how incredibly dark it is to buy and sell people. This is a really ugly thing. Things that are happening to children. If I go back 20, 30 years, when I was, younger, you didn't hear about things like this. But now to the surface, the abuse of children is astronomical, the things that they do to them. I don't even want to think about it. But see, that's the thing. We don't want to think about it. But the shadow, these things are coming to surface. But before, they were all pushed back and people hid all this stuff and were doing things in secret. But now it's such an incredible problem. It's like, what do we do about it at this point? It's insane. It's insane what a problem it is. But that is especially, we don't want to become the shadow 100%. We want to acknowledge it. Okay, this is what's going on. Now we're going to treat the problem. We're going to get to the core wound is what we need to do with the collective shadow. How do we ultimately do that? We have to do it one person at a time. There's really, one person at a time has to do it. Whether it's, okay, I'm going to deal with my own darkness. And then once you've done that, you've shined light and you've acknowledged your shadow and you've dealt with and fixed whatever you got to fix. You've acknowledged your light, your dark, and your gray wings. You gotta face it and do something about it, and see, okay, that's really some repulsive stuff I've got buried in my shadow. I didn't even realize that was a part of me. And that's one of the things we have to acknowledge. Certain things are a part of us. Another issue even is men and women. Hey, we've dealt with this shadow for a long time. And just even the conservative, we have our own morals and ethics and values that we have. But there are certain attitudes, men and women, and even women project onto women and men project onto men. This is very strong because it has to do with the shadow. Maybe you could take a very conservative woman, and in her 30s, she's got a good job. She's got a couple kids. She's a good wife. Everything is going good. But then she sees certain women on TV that dress very skimpy. They're drinking, they're smoking pot. They're just being whatever. They swear. Oh, I don't like that. That's repulsive. But then take that woman a decade later and she's divorced. Her kids are teenagers and she has that midlife crisis, right? So she starts going out with her friends and drinking, and then she picks up a habit of smoking. She starts dressing sexy. See, that woman she was repulsed by all those years, when she was in her 30s, somewhere in there when she was all repulsed, there was a shadow character. But it inevitably came to surface when everything broke down in her life. See what I'm saying, how the shadow works? And right now, everything's been breaking down, even in this country. The collective has broken down. And when that happens, here comes that shadow barreling through. And that's why we're all experiencing it during this time. So, but yeah, like I said, we have to, how do we fix it? How do we acknowledge it? We have to start doing it within ourselves. It's not about, okay, that person is wrong and I'm going to go and I'm going to get in a debate with them and I'm going to argue with them that they've got it all wrong. That's not really how we deal with it. We have to go inside and we have to deal with it. And then we got to look at there, and then we got to see, what do I have in common with that person? How can I have a discussion with them? And I could try to get to some kind of common ground that I'm not necessarily in opposition with them. Maybe I can try to understand them. And if I can relate to them, then we can have a good discussion and we can kind of work out our shadow together in a very, systematic way. See what I'm saying? Versus the fight, oh, you're wrong. You're wrong. Black and white, gray wings, right? Black and white, gray wings. And we've got to watch that. And then the card that I ended with was the Hierophant reversed. Now, most ceremonial magicians have got away with him being the Pope. But one of the things they do acknowledge that he is the keeper of the law, and he definitely does also guard those, spiritual laws and spiritual truths. And really, what we are having right now, especially in this country, but in other places in the world too, is it is a spiritual crisis, especially when the shadow has come to the forefront in such a dramatic way. And then especially to have a reversal is there are a lot of people that don't want to keep the law, these basic spiritual laws that have to do even with fundamental human rights. We are seeing a huge breakdown with that, a lack of respect and love for each other. People don't love each other right now. And isn't that one of the biggest parts of the law? Love your neighbor as yourself. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. That the do unto others as you would have them do unto you is pretty much across the board in any religion. There's, even if you go Google, look and see how many of them have that basic law, as that this is what all spirituality really is about. To see each other in each other is so fundamental and so true. But right now with the Hierophant reverse, one of the things is when he is represented by the Pope or the Hierophant, however you want to see him, the keeper of the spiritual law, is he blesses. He blesses like this. How the Pope does. You see him walking around in a crowd and he blesses everyone. But there is a Catholic superstition that they try to avoid the shadow of his hand when he comes to bless, because they are afraid that if they get into his shadow, if they step into it, they could be cursed. And so you could say when there is a reversal, we're dealing with the shadow of his hand, when we're almost being cursed right now. And in some ways, there is a little bit of truth to that, to be honest. We've always dealt with a curse in some way when you think about it, when it comes to the, spirituality and the collective. And that's one of the things we're trying to overcome. What do we always say? Be blessed, that we want to be blessed, blessings to you. We all say that in the spiritual community, right? We want everybody to be blessed and everything. But that's one of the things we're kind of dealing with, the shadow of the Hierophant's hand right now. And we're kind of under it as all this comes to surface and all our gunk. But I really, like I was saying, I don't feel it's necessarily a bad thing. It's a worse thing to hold it back. Now, a lot of people definitely see someone like Trump, as a kind of a shadow character. But I want you to even step back, because this is one of the things I've told my group. Step back. As a spiritualist, as he is saying all these things and so forth, one of the things I've said before is, you don't know if he is an ascended master. You don't know what his soul contract was when he came here. Because one of the things, love him or hate him, with him taking that office, a lot of stuff came to light because of him. Just like what I talked about George Floyd, this could be his soul contract to change the world. Even his daughter said, my daddy changed the world. And Trump also changed the world. But he brought things to surface. Racism wasn't his fault. He may be saying things that are, but it's not his fault. It's beyond before he was ever born. Certain things with politics being corrupt before he was born. You know, issues with religion and being oppressive before he was born. We can't blame everything on him. And everybody, you could say, in the same token, yes, he shows his shadow very loud and clear. He does. But we are all projecting our shadow onto him right now too. Because that's where we kind of need to step back. Okay, he says these things, and wow, that's really racist what he said and so forth. But at the same time, does that mean you've never looked down on anyone else in any way, shape, or form? That's what we've kind of got to assess. He can be a perfect mirror. He is good at being a perfect mirror of that. No, I'm not going to vote for him. But I'm just giving an example how we as spiritualists kind of have to step back. What's his soul contract? For all I know, his soul contract, obviously his soul contract was to be president. I would say yes, that is his soul contract. But at the same time, did this country not create him? Did all these issues that we had going on brewing under the surface of our collective shadow, did it not make him who he is? We kind of collectively have to take responsibility is what we need to do. He is a reflection of all of that we had buried for a long time. We've got to face that. So it's a lot of stuff with the collective shadow, but like I said, it's real hard. We can't fix the whole collective shadow, one person, but one person can spark something, definitely can spark a movement. We've seen that happen many times. And I have a feeling we're going to see more sparks because I also have the Ace of Wands. We're going to see more things spark that are going to deal with other things coming to surface within the collective shadow that we were like, oh, that too, because it's time, because Spirit wants it all out in the forefront. Spirit wants it dealt with now. If we're going to get to that new earth, we've got to deal with this right now. I hope you enjoyed my read.